Hi, welcome everyone to the Stow Veterans Day Breakfast. My name is Chris Spear. I'm the president-elect of the Rotary Club of Neshoba Valley, which serves the town of Stow, Bolton, and Lancaster. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, an armistice or temporary cessation of hostilities in the Great and Terrible War was declared between the Allied nations and Germany. Commemorated as Armistice Day beginning the following year, November 11th became a legal federal holiday in the United States in 1938. In the aftermath of World War II and the Korean War, Armistice Day became Veterans Day, a holiday dedicated to American veterans of all wars. I personally have not served in the armed forces myself, but I've had a father and an uncle who served in the Army, an uncle who also served in the Navy, a grandfather who served in the Army in World War I, World War II, and unsuccessfully tried to sign up for the Korean War. They told him he was too old. And a cousin who served in the National Guard in Afghanistan. My story is not unique. If not a veteran yourself, almost everyone here has a relative or loved one who has served in the armed forces. We honor and thank you for your support for the overall mission of U.S. security and peace. Now let's begin today's program with a flag ceremony and a pledge of allegiance led by the Boy Scouts Troop 1 Stow, Connor Bernklow and Teddy Burke.
Good morning. Please remove your hat, and would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Keller. Thank you. You may be seated.
And I'd like to invite Michael Healy up here to give a blessing.
Dear Lord, today we honor our veterans, worthy men and women who gave their best when they were called upon to serve and protect their country. We pray that you will bless them, Lord, for their unselfish service in the continual struggle to preserve our freedoms and our safety and our country's heritage for all of us. Bless them abundantly for the hardships that they faced, for the sacrifices they made, for the many different contributions to America's victories over tyranny and oppression. We respect them and we thank them, and we honor them and we are proud of them. And we pray that you will watch over these special people and bless them in peace and happiness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Boy Scout Troop 1 will now lead us in a responsive reading of We Remember. There are copies on the table, and Aiden Gross will be leading this.
We remember with sorrow those whom death has taken from our midst, taking those dear ones into our hearts with all of our beloved. We recall them now with reverence. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of the winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of the summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and are sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us. Yes, we remember them. Thank you.
Thank you, Aiden. I'd like to make a few acknowledgments. Thank yous go out to the following people. Allison Toole, Director of the Council on Aging. Let's see, where's Allison? Oh, there we go. Who was very helpful planning this event. Laura Spear from the Rotary Club in Neshoba Valley, who provided a lot of guidance. Financial support from the Stow Friends on the Council on Aging, the Rotary Club of Neshoba Valley, Bank of America, Keller Williams, Colt Lars Group, and Dunkin' Donuts. To our cooks, Laura Spear, Dan Ignacio, plus Dana Gray, Marcia Rising, members of the Rotary Club who helped set up and working today, Yvonne Otto, Lee Carpenter, Richard Simon, Rich and Mary Garcia, Brian Burke, and Deb Kotlars. Nancy McPherson of Nancy's Airfield Cafe for cooking and ordering some of the food. Boy Scout Troop 1 for their help in setting up, cleaning up the flag ceremony and the responsive reading. Students from the Interact Club of Neshoba Valley High School for their assistance. Lou Halpern for helping with the sound system and filming for Stow TV. Phil Mosley for help with the First Parish Church, and many other volunteers whose names I may have forgot. I'd also like to mention Jamie Eldridge and Kate Walrath here today also. We have Don Hawks, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and Charlie Kern from the Stow Board of Selectmen. Next, I'd like to acknowledge our veterans. Would you please stand as I call out the armed services in which you have served in alphabetical order? The Air Force and Air Force Reserve, the Air National Guard, Army and Army Reserve, Army National Guard, Coast Guard and Coast Guard Reserve, Marine Corps and Marine Corps Reserve, Navy and Navy Reserve. I'd like to thank all of you for your service. So the Interact Club will now hand out letters that were written by fifth graders in the Stow school system to the veterans, thanking them for their service. So all of you may have received a flag on your way in. Each year for Memorial Day, the Stow Veterans Grave Committee purchases flags to refresh the graves of all veterans buried in our 3 cemeteries. There are over 300 veterans' graves in town going back to the French and Indian Wars up to the present day, and they're marked with assistance from the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and the Stow Minuteman Company. The flags are created by a U.S. flag maker of Marietta, Georgia, who is donating 100,000 flags this year in recognition of our veterans who protected us and made it possible to live in a land of freedom and independence. And this company has selected Stow to participate in their 2015 Support Our Veterans campaign, and we'll be providing with photographs of how everyone has received these flags for the ceremony. All right, now I'd like to introduce Kate Hogan. State Representative Kate Hogan. She's a Stow resident. She represents the 3rd Middlesex Districts, which consists of the towns of Bolton, Hudson, Maynard, and Stow. At the State House, Representative Hogan serves as on the chair of the Public Health. She fights hard for all of us. Thank you, Kate.
Good morning, everyone. Sincere and heartfelt gratitude to you all for showing up here to celebrate our veterans. And to all veterans here today, thank you for your service. We are part of ceremonies being held across the country by a grateful nation to honor you who have made possible all the freedoms and liberties that we can sometimes take for granted. As of last year, Massachusetts ranks first in the nation in veterans programs and services, offering nearly 70 in total. Honoring our veterans and their families with legislation is a proud November tradition in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. I am proud of Massachusetts for leading the nation in the depth and breadth of veteran services, though we know we can and should do more. For we can never fully repay the members of our armed services for what they have endured, but as they have been willing to invest in our future, let us invest in theirs, and let us never forget why it is appropriate to do so. I joined my colleagues in the House of Representatives this year to pass the Stolen Valor Act, criminalizing falsely representing oneself as a veteran or a recipient of specific military honors in order to receive money, property, or tangible benefit. This crime will be punishable by a fine of $1,000, and it could include imprisonment. The House also passed related bill dealing with stealing, damaging, or desecrating veterans' graves and inappropriately removing a commemorative American flag representing the services of our military. Under this legislation passed, Purple Heart recipients would have free access to state parks, forests, and reservations for the rest of their lives. After their military service is done, some veterans are left with post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury, and this can sometimes lead to drug or alcohol abuse and in some cases crime. Instead of sending them to jail, Massachusetts has created the new Veteran Treatment Court, and these are so very important in our state, and I am so very, very proud. For it is said in the military, leave no one behind, and providing these services through the courts ensures those veterans who have come before the court to get the services they need to fulfill that mission and to prevent incarceration or jail. We can't afford to leave our veterans behind, especially those suffering from these invisible wounds of war, and we have seen so much of this with our most recent generations and the many, many individual wars that they have fought and been sent back to so many times. It has been really an eye-opening experience for me through my life to be dealing with our veterans all through the generations and to know that we will be taking care of those coming home. And again, as I say, our country and our state cannot do enough. And let us reflect on what has been given, what has been protected, and what has been sacrificed by each generation of America's servicemen and women, and let us commit here today to an America worthy of the sacrifice and service of our veterans. Please never forget. Please never break faith. God bless our veterans. God bless this great Commonwealth. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce our main speaker. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Commander John B. Tata, U.S. Navy Reserves. Commander Tata enlisted in the Naval Reserve in 1962, received a BS in Engineering at WPI, attended Officer Candidate School, and was commissioned ensign U.S. Navy. He toured on the research ship USS Marysville and was the executive officer on the USS Chewanak. Close.
There's no Indians from North Carolina here, so you won't.
Okay. Following a 2-year tour on the U.S. Naval Academy faculty, he attended the U.S. Naval Destroyer School and was assigned to engineering officer aboard the frigate USS Gray. Released from active duty in 1975, Commander Tata joined the Naval Reserve and served on board USS Edison. He commanded the Fleet Training Group and served on other units, including the faculty of the College of Holy Cross, Naval ROTC, and the Naval War College. Commander Tata retired from the Naval Service in 1993. His decorations include the Navy Achievement Medal, Navy Unit Commendation, Naval Reserve Meritorious Service Medal, Vietnam Service Medal, and others. He continues to serve in various military organization boards and is the past president of the Massachusetts Bay Council of the Navy League of the U.S. A Rotarian for 27 years, he is twice past president of the Leominster Rotary Club and a Paul Harris Fellows. Please welcome Commander Tata.
Thank you, Chris, Laura, President Jim. It's wonderful to be at a Rotary event like this. And most of all, thank you, fellow veterans. Can we have a hand for the fellow veterans? And I'd like to say, I read the article referenced by Representative Hogan about both the grave markers and the parks and the other items that the legislature just passed, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And she's correct. Based on most of the military associations I belong to, Massachusetts is a leader in providing for its veterans. Tonight, I want to, tonight. Day went by fast, didn't it? I want to discuss the Navy operations in Vietnam. I toured there in 69 and 70 and went back on a little trip in 73. I think when everyone thinks of the Navy in Vietnam, first name that comes up is a senator, one of the oldest. Anybody know that name? How about all you youngsters here? Ran for president. Correct, John McCain. And what was John McCain's role in Vietnam? He was a Navy aviator. So that's the first slide I've got here. And aviation, you think about that. That was a big part.
This works now. So
Oh, thank you, Chris.
you don't need my help.
And the second area I think most people think of is the area related to our current Secretary of State, Mr. Kerry. Who's got a recall of Mr. Kerry, where he served? And what part? What area? Let's go, pal. One more. How about in the rivers? So those are the two things most people think about when they think about the Navy and the Vietnam conflict, which began 50 years ago. Well, the Navy had a few more missions. Carrier operations and river operations we talked about. The Navy also was highly involved in intelligence gathering. From the ocean, listening to signals coming out of North Vietnam and coming off the Russian trawlers, which also had a presence in the Gulf of Tonkin. And everybody's heard the term, an army moves on its stomach. Well, logistics was, again, a very important part. One of my best friends was on an ammunition ship. They spent all their time staying away from everybody else except when they had to go alongside and replenish their ammunition. Well, I was involved in logistics, and I was involved in the salvage Navy. This is the ship I served on in 68, 69, and 70. USS Chewanik, as I said, mentioned, named after an Indian tribe in North Carolina. "205 feet long, 1,589 tons. Diesel electric drive. We could do 16 knots on a good day with a following wind. 5 officers, 65 enlisted, and our main armament, aside from a 3-inch gun, was our tow lines. I'm going to show you a map here, and I wish I could have made that bigger, now that I'm looking at the size of the room. But 1969, all right, we were there. We left San Diego and got back a little over 6 months later. Okay, let me make sure I learned how this guy works now, right? One of our first stops after we crossed the Pacific was Subic Bay. Any sailors here who've been to Subic Bay in the 60s or 70s? One. Basically your home port in Westpac, right? Ah, okay. Well, it was a large shipyard, a large Navy base with about all the facilities you'd find, and that was basically your home port for the time you were serving in that area. We left Subic, we went to Da Nang up here. There was a big Army and Marine presence there. We did some salvage work. Oh, you're not coming back on me here. There. And then we got sidetracked to, wow, we're going wild. Hey, doing great here, aren't we? I'm going to need my technical assistant. Anyway, when we were out at a place called Triton Island, a merchant ship decided the island was in the way, and the island wouldn't move. So they drove half their ship over a coral reef. We spent some time there. And from there, we went back to our base in Subic. We went off to Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a famous R&R port. Anybody here been to Hong Kong in the last 50 years? What do you think? Best tailors in the world at the best prices. I'll keep talking, and Chris will get me back on track. Other adventures we had. Over in Da Nang, as I said, they have a big air base. We towed a lot of cargo into that area. This is Hong Kong. While we're on that slide, you see at the bottom of the slide here, a little boat with all these young ladies in it. That was a business run by a lady named Mary Sue, and she used to come and paint ships. And if you wanted your bunk room painted, you saved up a bucket full of brass belt buckles, and she'd paint your bunk room for brass. I'm diverging here. Anyway, in Da Nang, one of the missions we did was recovery. We'd go find fallen aircraft in the ocean. I had a crew of divers. I was very glad that I had never gone to diving school from what I learned from these guys when they came out of the water. But their job was to go down and recover the remains of the air crews. And one afternoon, we were hunting for a helicopter, and about 100 yards behind us, a Phantom crashed. We were able to get most of the parts of that one pretty easily. I'm going to ask you to back to the map, Chris. Can you do that? All right. One of the other spots we got to, over here, Sarahet, Thailand. We were sent there to tow targets for the Thai Navy. I've been shot at by 3 navies, okay? And these guys were probably the worst. One of the unique things that occurred there was one morning, we're up there checking our equipment, getting ready to leave, and we see this rowboat go across the harbor. And the harbor's only a couple of 100 yards wide. And there's these 2 Thai sailors in a rowboat, and they go out to this small ship anchored out there in the middle of the harbor, and they start rowing back, and we see there's a line coming out of the rowboat. They get back to the pier. You hear there's 6 Thai ships tied up in front of us. All these whistles go, horns blare. Suddenly, the decks of the ships are full of sailors, and they're pulling a 200-foot ship across the harbor with a rope. Talk about conserving energy, huh? From there, we got to Bangkok. Anybody been to Bangkok? Jewelry, bronzeware.
Party City.
Yeah. Let me see, I'm going to. And after that, we ended up. I should put my little thing on Bangkok. After that, we ended up working down here around the Saigon area. We got to spend Christmas Day taking one of our fellow ships, an LST, off a reef down there at the mouth of the Cochin River. And after that, we towed folks from here back to Subic and did a lot of other odd jobs. 6 months, the final adventure was coming home. We stopped at Guam, and we picked up a couple of friends, 2 World War II LSTs, and we towed them back to San Francisco. 6 knots across the Pacific, 34 days. The last day, because at that time, if you went to Hawaii, you could not bring anything fresh inside the harbor. And when you left Hawaii, you didn't want to take anything fresh back to the mainland. So the last day we were living on carrot and raisin salad. I'll never eat that again. So that's the story of the Chewanix cruise in '69 and early '70. I have to say it was the second trip I made over there. We're very fortunate. All right. We had a few minor injuries. Nobody died on our ship. We saw a few things that we didn't really enjoy seeing. But I have to say I have so much respect for the Army, Air Force, and Marine personnel that served inside, in country, a place I would not care to have spent any time other than the short port visits we made. That's my story. 31 years of active and reserve. I got to see places much nicer than most of the ones on that cruise. And I can't tell you it was a privilege to wear my country's uniform. And I would recommend it highly to any of you young folks here in the Scouts. I work with Navy ROTC at Holy Cross on one of their committees, and it's really great to see these youngsters that are embarking on a career, all right, in their early 20s, and what they have ahead of them in the all-volunteer military. Anybody have any questions? I must have done a terrible job.
Your ship, when was that ship built and what class was it, and do you know where?
It was a Arakara ATF 86 class, and as I recall, I think it was built in Virginia, in Norfolk, and it was built a year after I was born, 1944. So, we were like same age. We were all driving our dad's equipment at that point in time. Anybody else?
Can you describe what it was like on 70 people on it's like a small ship? What was that like?
It was fairly crowded, all right, and believe me, the quarters were, as I said, built for the generation before us. We had, let's see, how many sailors' quarters we had? Quarters aft, and in a room. I mean, we put 60 sailors in spaces like from the two bunk rooms together would be from that door to this wall and that far wide. Okay, things were close. All right, your neighbor was about 13 inches above you. You were stacked 3 high. All right, I was second in command. I had a room all to myself. The only room without air conditioning. Somebody forgot to put a vent in from the radio room to my quarters. And yeah, you get to know everybody pretty well in all that amount of time. You learn about their families and their likes and their stuff and whatever. And I was 26 years old, and suddenly I'm the father, I'm the mother, I'm the uncle to all these teenagers. An experience I cherish and will never forget. It was just the experience of being the ship's navigator. I always think about the holiday in October as celebrating the second best Italian navigator because I never missed a landfall.
Did you ever get seasick?
I came awful close once. The thing is, I started on a ship that was smaller than this one. And after getting through that, anything else was a no-brainer. And I had a good old trusty Navy chief tell me, you want to stay well, eat soda crackers and drink a lot of water, and you'll be fine.
Are you in touch with other members of the crew?
I have to tell you, I spent a week a few years ago. I had the opportunity to stay at my niece's apartment in D.C. I was concerned that my ship was not on the Agent Orange list. I knew we should be, so I went and I got the records, and that's where all this comes back to me now from checking those deck logs. And I'm in touch with 2 of the crewmen right now, one of whom is dealing with the VA and cancer from Agent Orange. Haven't made any contact of any of the others. There's an association of fleet tug sailors, and that's how I track these 2 fellas down. I'll just do a lobbying effort. It's 2 years now since I submitted a claim to the VA. Thankfully, I wasn't sick enough, but it was certified that my ship was a Blue Water Agent Orange ship, and to this day, the name's still not on the VA website. I don't know. Is any?
Do you know when your ship was decommissioned?
Oh, I just looked that up, and it was 1977, and it's actually still active in the Ecuadorian Navy. So I was thinking maybe I'll take my wife and daughter and we'll do a vacation to Ecuador and touch base, because there are no more of those left in America. All right? They had 2 in Baltimore. They did not survive a storm. The association hasn't raised enough money. I did have. Am I dragging this out?
No.
Okay. I don't want anybody to miss lunch. Okay. I did have an experience this past winter. The ship I was on in the reserve fleet in Newport, USS Edson, one of the last all-gun destroyers, is a museum in Bay City, Michigan. And my daughter and I went there in the dead of winter because we wanted to take pictures for one of my shipmates who was dying. And there's a group up there that have done a wonderful job preserving this. The only down check is they wanted they have mannequins dressed as sailors, but the only place they could get the mannequins was from a woman's store. And we didn't have any women in the crew 40 years ago. Not anything else from you youngsters? Well, you scouts are learning a lot of valuable traits that would serve you well when you join the military. And I guess most of you will go out camping as soldiers or Marines. I started my career in Army ROTC, and my father said to me, you know, I was in the Navy, and you get at least 3 good meals and a clean bed just about every night. Well, that was close. Well, I want to thank Chris and Laura and President Jim again for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commander Tata. So, I'd like to conclude the breakfast today with a closing flag ceremony and a photo of all the veterans. After the colors are retired, all vets should meet here in front of the Rotary banner. We'll clear out some of this equipment. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So, Connor and Aiden, if you could have a closing flag ceremony and retire the maybe the flag to the front hallway. Yeah.
Scout time. Scout-o. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey Scout law, to uplift you at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Scout law. Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. 2. Tie the colors. At ease.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And as soon as we clear this out, we'll get a picture of all the veterans for 2015. I got it. I got it. Sorry, I got it.